Do not adjust your set. There's nothing wrong with your set. We are in control. We can control the darkness and the light. I'm filming it in the darkness to make a point. I spent years watching Game of Thrones, and toward the end I started having doubts about it. When people, in the third season it took forever for people to travel short distances across the continent, and then they started teleporting, and they started pitting main characters up against each other in fights to the death, and neither of them died. But it was not enough for me to think that the show was bad. But then came that third episode of the last season. The first two episodes, it was getting off to a really slow start, which was concerning considering that there were going to be fewer episodes. And then it was so dark, you couldn't see anything. They had new uniforms for the Unsullied, and they were black. Just black. Not black and red. They could have given them little red dragons on their breasts and shields and maybe red armbands. Yeah, I understand that they wanted it to be black because it's the long night and it's in the dark. There's people fighting in the dark. But medieval knights, wore bright colors, heraldry, so you could tell who was who, because if they all just wore plain armor, it would all look the same. And the wildlings had outfits that were uniforms. These are people who have no government at all, and they got uniforms. They all look alike. Anybody who's ever been to a powwow has seen that people in the traditional costumes have a variety of different looks, even though they fit the same style. And Roger Corman, in his movie Bram Stoker's The Burial of the Rats, had this little cult of rat women who wore little tiny costumes that were bathing suit sized, little rat costumes, and each one of them had a unique costume. And Roger Corman was famous for doing things on the cheap, while HBO had given the producers of Game of Thrones pretty much an unlimited budget to do whatever they wanted with costumes. But he put the wildlings in all identical costumes. That you could argue that maybe because of the cold they needed to be the same, but even then they could have made fake fur of 3 different animals and put them together in different ways and people would look different. Yeah, but even though they wanted this darkness, they didn't have to make it all dark. They could have put fluorescent things. Frank Miller and Bill Sienkiewicz have both done some really awesome sketches in their comics where everything was black except for one color, either white or red or something like that. And it looked really awesome and really scary, and they could have done that. Could have done with fluorescent light. Like this. Well, that's not showing up so well, but this is. See how fluorescent can make things show up? So darkness doesn't have to be completely without light. They could have they could have used animation to make only the red on the Unsullied costume show up and have that red disappear when they got turned into whites. They could have given the wildlings a little flash of green. They could have done a variety of colors. They could have put some blue onto Knights of the Vale. There was lots they could have done and have it be mostly black with a splash of color so you could see what was going on. When I first watched this, I watched it at night with all the lights out, and I still could barely see. That was ridiculous. And that's just on the look of the thing. Then there's the plot. That the plan they came up with was worse than no plan at all. That, they didn't understand the purpose of a castle. You've got all these whites coming, and so their plan was to get outside of the castle walls and dig a ditch, and then go to the other side of that ditch, and then to put the artillery in front of it, and give the Dothraki no weapons at all. They had nothing that would work against the whites until Red Missy shows up to set fire to their swords, but they didn't know she was going to show up. As far as they were concerned, they're throwing the Dothraki lives away when they could have made great scouts to let them know when the whites are coming. And the Night King, he's had 8,000 years to think of a plan, and he couldn't come up with something better than, let's have the mob rush the castle. He could have had a small force, like maybe only 10,000, pin down the castle so they couldn't leave, and send the rest of his forces to King's Landing and resurrect everybody in the southern kingdoms and then bring them as an army of undead to come kill everybody else. And having it get resolved in one battle in the north means that the southern kingdoms are never going to believe that it ever happened. It's just a myth. Which was, that was already a problem. They didn't believe it had happened before because it was only the first men back then. And in the later seasons, every time the people express fears, somebody say, oh, the wall has held them back for thousands of years. And I wanted to scream at them, but the wall has never been tested. The wall was built after the Long Night. They don't actually know it's going to work. As it turned out, it didn't work. So Game of Thrones, it used to be one of the best shows. I would recommend it to everybody. And now I tell people, stop after the 5th season. After that, anything that you would make up would be better than what was on the show. So now I tell people, don't bother to watch it because you'll just have your heart broken. After I saw it, I had to watch other things that follow the plot structure of if the gun is used to kill somebody in the 3rd act, it must appear in the 1st act. If the gun appears in the 1st act, it must be used in the 3rd act. And there were lots of guns that we were shown in the Game of Thrones that were never fired, and then there were others that were fired but were never shown. This whole cult of subverting expectations is just ridiculous. In the early season, in the 1st season, we were shown that people are executed by having their heads cut off. We were shown the sword ice. We were shown the headsman who cuts off people's heads for the South. It was not that big of, it was not pulled out of nowhere when Ned Stark got killed. We were shown all the pieces beforehand. It was a logical conclusion of that, though. You think that's not going to happen because he's the main character, but we were shown that this was going to happen. It subverted our expectations in that we thought this sort of thing can't happen, but we were shown all the pieces beforehand. But in the later seasons, they just pull things out of their butt, like Arya and Sansa are going up against each other, and then all of a sudden they're on the same side. What? All kinds of stuff like that. So I just want to talk for a few minutes about what used to be one of the best shows ever and turned out to be a heartbreakingly bad show.